OFs are online falsehood, deliberate falsehoods. There is a spectrum between that and truth. You would agree? So you have truth on one hand, you have falsehoods on the other. Closer to the truth side, you will have opinions based on truth, you have misimpressions, you have mistakes, you have misinterpretation, misrepresentation, and then falsehood. So there's a spectrum. You would accept?
Yes, and that spectrum is key to today's discussion.
Yes. And I think what you will want to say is that one must have a differentiated response or a variegated response to what you might find on that spectrum.
Not just a different response, but also concern over who gets to decide what lies where on the spectrum.
Yes. The need to eradicate deliberate online falsehoods in the form that I've outlined to you, using the definition in the Canadian paper, you would have no difficulty with. So on one end of the spectrum, we would all agree that something must be done to remove this from, as far as possible, from our online landscape, correct?
I think that might be a bit too strong a word. We certainly must challenge falsehoods. Eradicating them is a bit different.
That steps must be taken to deal with these falsehoods. And in some cases, you will need to remove them. In some cases, you need to correct them with true information. In some cases, you do a combination of that.
Yeah, that's probably true. Although, of course, before you can do any of that, you also have to determine truth or falsehood, which, as you know, is also can be debatable.
For speaking for myself, believe that there should really only be one truth.
Unfortunately, truth can change over time.
No, I mean, especially when you're dealing with a set of facts, there can only be one set of facts.
Even received scientific wisdom changes over time. So
No, I'm not talking about scientific wisdom. I'm saying factual position. There can only be one set of facts.
But how those facts are presented.
Let me give you a set of examples which might help. Let's say we have an altered video of President Obama criticizing all Christians. Or as you had a video of Ahok, altered video, fake video, criticizing all Muslims, Islam. Do you think there are two sets of facts or only one set of fact?
And the fact that's being put forward is that, say, Obama made certain statements. So if that is...
There is a video with words put into his mouth, which is possible now with technology. So if you listen to the video, he is criticizing Muslims. Likewise, you had a real case of Ahok, altered video, attacking Muslims. Do you think there are shades of truth in that?
The specific cases that you mentioned, no.
Okay, let me give you another example. A suggestion that President Jokowi is Christian. Do you think that shades of truth in that?
This is where the spectrum comes in. So such things that are clearly false and could be debunked would be on one end of the spectrum as a clear falsehood.
The question is, are there shades of truth in such a statement?
Not in this case, but unfortunately, content is not always this clear.
So I think in this discussion, it's good to keep in mind, we are talking about factual falsehoods. I think you have a legitimate point in saying, how do we define falsehoods? And are there, at the margins, some areas where there can be some disagreements? But let's keep to conceptually clear definitions first. We are talking about factual falsehoods. We are not talking about opinions. For example, you take a table, there can be shades of opinion as to whether it is a nice table, whether it's a bad table, whether it's a useful table, not a useful table. We are not talking about opinions. We are not talking about comments. We are talking about facts. So let's stick to that. I mean, you've got to be conceptually clear. That is what we are dealing with here. And in any such thing, of course, then there must be a mechanism to identify what is true and what is false factually. Okay? So I don't think we are talking about that yet. So today, at this stage, the question is simply, If something is clearly false, in the way that I've told you, Hillary Clinton is selling arms to ISIS, or she is running a pedophile ring, all of this has been put forward and believed by a number of people. Or the Ahok examples that I gave you, or the President Obama, there was an actual video, but it was an experiment done by a university. So sticking to that, is there a place for those in the framework of speech? And I think the specific question is, these sorts of falsehoods, conceptually now, leaving aside the question of whether how we come to decide on their falsity. Conceptually, once, false, true, if it is false, do you need to deal with it? I think that is the angle that's being explored right now.
I know, Law Minister, you are not preferential towards debating on philosophical issues, but I think we do need to point out that there is a difference between what is factual.
No, I am actually talking about a philosophical issue. I am talking about a conceptual issue. So
that's very good. Yeah.
So let's
if that's the case, then
I think let's deal with the conceptual issue.
Sure.
True and false.
Okay.
And if it is false, should we deal with it?
If that's the case, then I think I do need to point out first and foremost that there is a difference between what is factual and what is truth, because while there can be various facts, and I think there's no disputing that something that is not factual should not be that case. But truth is often an interpretation of various facts that are put together. So I think we do need to make that distinction.
Oh, sorry, if I may clarify again, I think you asked whether we want to take action against falsehoods. So we may want to take action against falsehoods which cause harm. So the question, of course, is what's the threshold for causing harm to society or to an individual? And ironically, sometimes we even take action against truths which are harmful. So that's another point to look at.
Could I also seek clarification then that the committee's definition of falsehood would come down to that narrow definition of something that is demonstrably not factual and wrong in the kind of Jokowi is a Christian sort of clearly false statements, and that's it?
I think there are different issues here. First, the conceptual point, true and false. I think that's clear. Our terms of reference are to deal with falsehoods. And certainly the way we are proceeding, thinking about, and panel members can disagree if they is we are not looking at, say, opinions which are unreasonable, for example. The facts may be true, but the opinion may be something that a very, very small minority, maybe 1 out of 1,000 might agree with. I don't think we are looking at opinions. For example, we are looking at facts. Then there are shades in terms of how you process this. How do you determine the truth versus what is false? And I did hear how Mr. Lee talking about there can be shades of truth. I think there is no point debating that point. I think we just leave it. I think different people can have different views as to whether there can be shades of truth. True, false. Following from that, taking into account the speed with which the internet moves, and sometimes you need to deal with it immediately. There has been some evidence given to the committee about whether how do you deal with something that is said to be false, whether you go and deal with it first and then determine whether it is true or false later, or whether you deal with it upfront, in which case it might take some time, and you weigh the consequences, the damage, and so on. I mean, those are issues which I think it's too premature for us to take a view on. Conceptually, in terms of our terms of reference, we are looking at falsehoods. What the kind of examples Mr. Tong has put forward, the kind of examples I've talked about. And we had a law professors who said to us what certainly I know and what the lawyers will know, which is that what is true and what is false is something that gets determined in court pretty much every day. That's the lifeblood of lawyers. So that has to be, something that is going to be dealt with. So should we deal with falsehoods? I think that's a question that's being discussed right now. And if so, how? How do you determine truth and false? I don't think those questions have been asked. They have been asked of other witnesses. And then the process, how should the process be? And what sort of speed with which we should move? And what comes first, what comes later? Those are issues that need to be thought through. I don't think Mr. Tong has been exploring those. Yeah, I hope that's clear.